So thank you everyone for coming along today. I know this is the last lecture of term, so we really appreciate you making the time, and we have an amazing guest speaker coming in. So it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Bryant, who is the founder and executive director of Bryant Research. So Chris and I did our PhDs at the same time in the same office, and he was like a couple of years ahead of me. So I've always sort of looked up to you and your career and what you've been able to achieve. So yeah, I'm really happy to have you here to talk to us all. You're going to be talking about the kind of practicalities of the work you do, the career you've had, and how you can sort of have impact through your business. So take it away, Chris. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Anaya. And thank you everyone for coming. We really do appreciate you logging on 5 o'clock on a Thursday. It's the end of term. You know, we're making the effort. So that's a real, well done all of you who are here. And let me say the feeling's mutual, Naya. I actually looked up to you also as soon as you joined the office. Yeah, because I remember you were the only other person that I had met who had heard of effective altruism on the call.
Yay!
And you had just
Brilliant.
been working with Molly Crockett, which I found very impressive.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah.
Molly's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So you
Feelings
guys
mutual, Chris.
Awesome. Yeah. So you guys are, in good hands with Anaya. I'm sure you've worked that out by now. I see we have a few more people filtering in, but that's okay. I'll get started, and I don't know if this is being recorded at all on your end, Anaya.
I can record it if you're happy for me to.
Yeah. I thought that might be part of it for
Great.
if people couldn't make it or whatever. I wanted to let people know also that I am streaming this presentation to YouTube at the same time. I'm not showing you guys on the stream. I'm just showing the slides and myself, but you can be heard. So if you want to speak during Q&A, just be aware that we're live on YouTube. So.
And Chris, how do you want to handle questions? So we have a Q&A tab set up so people can post questions in there throughout, and then maybe we can do questions at the end, or you can take them as and when. What would you prefer?
Good question. I guess we'll do it at the end, just so that I'm not looking down at it. Yeah.
Sounds good. So if anyone has any questions, just post them in the Q&A, and then I'll do them at the end. Great.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you again for having me. Really a pleasure to speak to you guys today. And I hear that you are mostly final year students with an eye on graduating next year. And so I wanted to talk to you about something that might be very imminent for some of you as business students, as a former business student myself, and tell you how to start a business for good. So I understand that if you're doing this module, you have self-selected to some extent as a fellow do-gooder. I mean that with love. Someone who wants to do good. I mean, that is really what that means, isn't it? Which is pretty awesome. And I don't know why anyone would want to be any other way. But when I was in business school in the University of Exeter, which looked a bit like this, I definitely felt a bit like an odd one out, in the sense that everybody else around me wanted to do some sort of accounting or auditing, or lots of people wanted to do banking and stuff like this. And I had really chosen to study business just because I thought it was something quite generic that would probably get me a job afterwards, frankly. I hadn't thought too much about what that meant. I wasn't somebody who was desperate to, work in the Big Four or something like this. And I was always quite interested in philosophy, and I used to go to my friend's philosophy class. And it was obvious to me that the thing to do, if there was a point to life, is to try to make the world a better place for others as much as possible. And that wasn't necessarily given in the business department. Not to slag them off, but people have different priorities, right? But I'm glad to know that people in this course are indeed fellow do-gooders. So good for all of you. And you'll be pleased to know that there is indeed a route to doing some real good as a business graduate. And while it seemed a little bit random that I was studying this at the time, now it has sort of come full circle and turned out to be extremely useful. So after I did that at Exeter, I did my MSc at University of Bristol in policy, which again was sort of generic.
Oh, hang on, Chris. Are you sharing any slides with us?
Oh, bloody hell. No, I'm not sharing with you, am I?
No,
Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right.
Oh, my goodness. I'm such an idiot.
No, you're all good.
My hilarious slides are going to waste. Goodness me. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good shout, no. All right, I'm have it on stream, but not here, clearly. Okay, good.
Right.
All right, well, this is the same picture on the previous tab.
Yeah,
so
okay, great. We can see that now. Yeah, we can see the great picture now.
Good, excellent. All right, well, I wouldn't have wanted you to miss out on this. Good, yeah, so then I did my MSc in Policy Research at University of Bristol, which again was sort of broad social science, really. Research methods and that kind of thing. It was really like a pre-PhD course in many ways. Then from there, I came to the University of Bath, where you guys all are, and did my PhD in psychology. This is a picture of me submitting my PhD during the start of lockdown. So this is just me at home submitting online, which was a less dramatic submission picture than I'd hoped for. But this was also a great experience because graduating when it was suddenly the new normal, that everybody was working from home and the world was suddenly a very different place, prompted me to go into business for myself, which I might not have done otherwise. I really think if I graduated in normal times, I'd be doing something much more normal now. So I guess in many ways that was a blessing. During my PhD, I had the opportunity to speak at a lot of conferences. This is me at the Good Food Institute conference in 2019, I believe. And I did a lot of this kind of thing. I was quite deliberately going to, you could say, industry events. I was doing my PhD on consumer acceptance of cultivated meat, and so I was trying to meet people in the cultivated meat space as well as speaking at these events and so on, which I think is a good opportunity to meet some people in the field if you can get to go to events of the field that you would like to work in. Then it's a great opportunity to make contacts. I was also very briefly on the television speaking about my research during my PhD. This is on BBC Points West. This is me. You might recognise this as the University of Bath cafeteria, I guess, is the sort of vegetarian cafe opposite the main cafe. So lots of cool opportunities that I had during the PhD to talk about my research, communicate about it, to meet people in the field, and to start to be a little bit known. One thing when you are publishing and when you're doing academic publications, you want to get a couple of publications under your belt, have people have heard of you, basically. And if you're doing something quite niche, as I was, there aren't that many people studying very closely consumer acceptance of cultivated meat in the world. So if you're one of them, you're probably one of, 2 or 3. So that was another kind of proved to be an advantage that I was doing something fairly niche at that time. And straight from there, as I said, when I graduated in 2020, I started my current company. This is a picture of us all at a conference this year. But it didn't start out this way. It was just me on my own on my laptop for a couple of years. With a logo and a website, and that's actually one of the main things that I would want to communicate with you all today, that if you are thinking of being self-employed and starting a business, I just wanted to be very clear that that is totally something that a normal person is allowed to do and can just go and make happen. Now, it's not, there's very much survivorship bias, right? Just start a business. But I just want to make it clear that although I had done a business degree, I very much kind of stumbled into doing what I'm doing now as a continuation of some of the work that I was doing during my PhD. I am a decent researcher and a decent business doer, but I'm, nothing exceptional that any of you couldn't do the same sort of thing that I've done and replicate, probably in a different field, but replicate the same sort of thing. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about how to go about that. But this is my team at the moment, and a couple of these people have left. There's currently 5 of us, which is these 5 at the back, including myself, and we are focused on doing business for good. So this course is, am I right in thinking this is like an environmental focused thing, or is it okay. So this is a course focused on the environment and doing business for good in terms of the planet, which of course is extremely important. There's I don't need to tell you all like massive challenges facing the climate and ecological breakdown and everything like that. I'm sure that you're well tuned into those issues, and the organizations which will solve those problems might be some non-profits, some might be some governments, and will also be some businesses. So for those of you who are thinking about sort of an altruistic career path, I encourage you to think about business potentially in those terms. It doesn't have to be that if something is a private profit-making company that it's sort of amoral or immoral. Really, I have always just thought of Bryant Research, which is my company, as a vehicle for me to do the good things that I want to do. So what do we do exactly? Well, you guys are focused on this course on doing good for the planet and doing good for the environment. And that is a large part of what we do, but we're mainly focused on doing good for animals. So in particular, animals in the food system. There are 70 billion is the number often quoted, land animals slaughtered each year for food. These are sentient creatures. This particular pig looks an awful lot like my dog. And they undergo painful mutilations throughout their life. They'll have their teeth and their tail clipped with no anesthesia. They will be kept in small cages for weeks at a time when they're giving birth, such that they can't even turn over. And they'll ultimately be slaughtered in gas chambers in the UK, which is a very noisy business. So, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, and I'm aware that most people in the audience here are not necessarily going to be vegetarian or vegan. But I just want to emphasize really the scale of this suffering. So there's like an insensitivity to scope, or insensitivity to scale problem here, where 70 billion, well, that sounds like a big number, but your emotional reaction to that probably wouldn't have been all that different if I had said 70 million. It just sounds like another very big number. So 70 billion is 1,000 times more than that, but your emotional reaction probably doesn't scale by 1,000 times. All of that is to say that the situation vis-a-vis factory farming really is very grim indeed. And there is an immense amount of suffering in the food system. And you don't have to be a vegetarian or vegan to recognize this. Most people agree that it is wrong, for example, to commit the painful mutilations that I just mentioned on pigs, and to keep pigs in cages, and so on. So there's, a very firm moral case to be made that we don't really need to be sending these guys into gas chambers for food. So that is our focus. That is my focus, and perhaps you can tell by the way I speak about it that it's something that I feel quite strongly about, and that has always been the issue that I have wanted to affect. And like I say, my business really has just been a vehicle to allow me to be able to do that. It's kind of just a legal structure where I can do the work that I want to do for animals, and that's kind of how I thought about it from the start. And it's interesting, although I did a business degree, my thinking about what a business should be and how to run a business has really had to come along with me and grow as I have just gone about doing things that I wanted to do for animals, and then sort of after the fact trying to make it work financially. So beyond the animal concerns, we can also talk about animal farming in terms of the greenhouse gases, the land use, the biodiversity loss, the opportunity cost of land. The water use, the nutrient runoff and eutrophication, air pollution, soil degradation, antibiotic use and antimicrobial resistance, zoonotic spillovers and pandemic risks, and foodborne illness burden. And also in terms of manure management failures and animal welfare harms, environmental justice and community health, and food crop externalities, resource inefficiency, public subsidies and other hidden costs, indigenous land conflicts, aquaculture pressures, and trade and biosecurity shocks. So all of these are societal issues which are exacerbated by farming of animals on the scale that we're doing it currently. I don't have time to go into detail on each of these, and perhaps that's for another lecture, but suffice to say there's a very strong case for trying to reduce the overall amount of meat and animal products consumed in the world. So these are some of the principles that we have written about the business on our website. And as I mentioned, the first one here really is the important one that frames it. We're more than just a business. Whilst we are a private company, our mission is to accelerate the protein transition, not to maximize profits. So this is the one that I'll linger on, really. Oftentimes when people learn more about what we do, which is providing research services to all of these organizations, many of which are animal charities, there is also meat alternative companies in here. It's all in the direction of reducing animal consumption, reducing the number of animals in factory farms. And often when people hear about what we do, they say, well, how come you're not a non-profit? A lot of our work is for non-profits. A lot of our work probably would qualify for things that a non-profit can do. We do, in fact, do projects which are unfunded and, just cost us money, basically. And so how come we're not a non-profit? The main reason for that, in my mind, is that I have had one experience where one grant was slightly delayed by the Charity Commission objecting, which is some body that oversees NGOs. And if you're a non-profit, you have to answer to the Charity Commission, and they, are a group of bureaucrats who at any time can decide that they don't like what you're doing and they're going to interfere and so on. So although there would be a lot of tax benefits, frankly, to being structured as a non-profit, I'm personally just allergic to that kind of bureaucracy, or even the chance of something like that happening. I'm not interested in doing the paperwork and having to justify what we do to somebody else. So I decided to steer clear of that. And I've really just noticed in the last year, like I say, my understanding of the business is kind of growing over time. But I've really just noticed in the last year that our annual profit is somewhat arbitrary, in the sense that it's just the difference between our bank balance at 2 points in time. And that sounds kind of obvious. What I'm saying is, in the last year, we on paper made a profit, I think, of about £15,000. And in the year before that, we made a loss on paper, I think, about £2,000. And yet, it's kind of going the same. It wasn't that 2 years ago we had a very bad year and then the last year we had a very good year. Those payments can fall either side of when your tax year happens to cut off, and you may have any kind of amount of work outstanding. So this year, although we had a decent profit on paper, we had been paid for a lot of work which we're not yet done, and so we basically owe work. You could think of that as like a liability on your balance sheet. So we're now at this stage where the profit from last year means that our sort of starting bank balance is something like 15,000, 17,000, something like that. And we will either have more than that or less than that at the time of the end of our next tax year. And I am now thinking of that as enough of a cushion that's kind of a couple of months, or well, about a month worth of expenses, and so it's really not my intention to ever make much more profit than that, frankly. I think if we lose a bit of money next year, that'll be fine. We'll still have enough in the bank. And if we make a little bit of money the next year, right, I don't want our profits to get, I don't want our profit margin to get higher than about 10%, which is an odd thing to say in business. Usually that's the thing that you're looking to maximize. But we are trying to provide very good value services to animal organizations, pro-animal organizations. We're trying to basically save them money on doing the thing that they were going to do with somebody else, or with some other method. And so as I'm looking at it, a thin profit margin, a small profit margin, is a sign that we are doing that well, because we are not extracting a bunch of money from these organizations more so than we are spending on doing the work. As I say, we do also have some unfunded projects. So for example, we do a summer survey which just costs us about £2,000. Nobody sponsors that or anything, and that is a way that we can sort of balance that out and put some of that. We also sponsor conferences and things like this, and I think of all of that as putting money back into the animal helping ecosystem, basically. So I riffed on that for a little while just because I want it to land that a business which is structured as a private company and a profit-making business, if that is your private company, you can really treat it however you want to. If there is a public company, in the sense of publicly traded shares, you can't really do that. Even if you're the CEO, you're going to have shareholders that you have to answer to. You have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value, right? If you just have your own private company and you are the only shareholder, you don't have to maximize shareholder value if you don't want to. You can do whatever you like in that. So a private limited company is not, you don't have the obligations to shareholders that you would in a public company, and you don't have the obligations to following rules that you would for if you're a non-profit. So I think a private limited company is a good way to do at least the type of good that we are trying to do. So these are the organizations that we've worked with, as I said, and yeah, they're all to do with reducing meat consumption. So this was really, my riff on business for good specifically, and how you can operate in a way that is tending to do good for your clients. And again, the key thing here is that we are adding more value for these organizations than they would otherwise get for the same amount of money, right? So in a sense, all businesses, you could, in some narrow transactional sense at least, you could say that all businesses are doing some good, right? Nobody is forced to do business with you. If they choose to do business with you, as you've learned in your Econ 101 class, I'm sure, then you must be adding more value than they could have had otherwise, right? So they're, transactions in a homo economicus mindset sort of always benefit both parties, otherwise they wouldn't have agreed to the transaction. So if you are a company that's providing a service to charities, you could think of this as, you're taking money from charities, right? But you're providing a service to them that's valuable, that they have decided that they're going to spend that money on, and so you are contributing to moving the mission forward. We used to do a lot of these projects entirely unfunded or for very little money. And at the start I could kind of get away with that. It was just me. I wasn't paying myself very much. I was keen to, do as much as possible to become known. And so I would give away work basically and do projects for next to nothing. These days, I have 5 paid staff. All we have to sell is our time, as I always say. And we have kind of grown into a position where we can't give away quite as much of it as we used to, although we do still do a bit of that, and we do keep everything in mind that we're doing this to maximize benefit to animals. So that was the business for good part of this, and I want to go through just at the end, and we'll have time for Q&A as well, some of the nuts and bolts of running a business, then, like what are the actual things that you would want to get in place. And I mean, I want to hit home how amateur it's fine to be when you start doing this. Everything in my business was, and really still is, just files in a Google Drive that are templates that I fill out, make a copy, fill out the template. And these are 4 templates that you need to get things off the ground. Really, if you have these 4 things and some value to offer, you can start approaching people, offering to add that value, and this is kind of the framework to make it go as a business. So the first thing is a contract template. Now, I used copy paste from a boilerplate template contract that somebody had sent me when I did this for the first time 5 years ago. But these days, I think you can probably just do this in ChatGPT. The contract template that I use is really nothing fancy. It's not a ton of legalese or anything like that. It's, I think, about 5 pages in a Google Doc, quite size 12 font, right? It's not a massive document. Quite simple language. Anyone could understand it. It's not, you don't have to be a lawyer to read it, right? And it just has, I think, 2 or 3 bits highlighted, which are like, change this for each client. One is the details of the work, which is just a few bullet points. We're going to run this analysis, we're going to write this report, we'll give you a presentation about it at the end. That's normally roughly what it is. One is the fee agreed in the payment schedule, so it's just says the fee, and then we usually do 50% payment at the start, 50% at the end. And then one is just like date and signature and stuff like that. So it's super easy each time. You just have, what am I going to do? How much is the payment? What's your name, right? So contract template, super easy. I would do on ChatGPT if I was doing it today, but I'll share my details at the end. And if people reach out to me, I am happy to share templates that you all can adapt for these things as well. So a contract, right? That's just very simple. Shows them that you mean business, right? That you're going to agree, make a legal agreement to deliver this for the money. Contract template, very simple. Second thing is invoice template. Again, very simple. All you want is your details up here, their details over here. I'd put an invoice number, just because some organizations need it to process an invoice, I guess, just to understand that this is an invoice in their system. Don't tell anyone, I make up my invoice numbers. Some of them are the same. I've sent invoices to people before and they've been like, this is the same invoice number you sent me last time. It's just it's just a number, from my point of view, that they need in order to put it through their system. From their point of view, they're imagining that I might have 100 different payments coming in and I'm going to be confused which one's which. I don't. So we're kind of fine there. But again, very, very basic setup here, right? You've got the items here, price each, quantity, totals, and then payment information, literally just your bank details, your bank number and sort code. And that's it, right? This is the format. And again, if you guys want to contact me and get templates for this stuff, I can share templates that you can adapt for your own stuff. Gosh, what a horrible numbery table for late on a Thursday. All right, stick with me. This is an important one. Cash flow forecast. This is basically just a budget and is going to tell you when or whether you're going to run out of money. So very simple, much simpler than it looks. I know this looks horrible for this time of day. But you have your money that you start with at the beginning of the month. This is months going forward from today, right? So here we are in December, and so on. You know the months. Here's our starting balance. Then we're just going to add up everything that we're expecting to get in that month, take off everything we're expecting to spend that month, and then simply what are we going to end up with at the end of the month, and then carry that forward to next month and repeat, right? So you have your starting balance, your ending balance, total in, total out. And this is useful because if you are working a salaried job, you get your salary at the end of the month, then you pay your rent or your mortgage, whatever it may be, and then it's quite straightforward, right? You're always getting the same salary, you have roughly the same expenses. When you're self-employed, it's really not like that. People talk about like a sort of feast and famine cycle where you can go for weeks or months without getting any work, and then suddenly you have a rush and everyone wants you to do work, and now you get, right now you've had a really good month and you've got a load of money. what you want to do, obviously, is smooth this out so that in your own experience, you still continue to have in your personal life a predictable amount of money coming in and going out. So let's say that I'm starting December here and I've got zero money, but I've got my first contract for £12,000. I'm going to get 6,000 now, and I'm going to get 6,000 in March. So rather than saying, great, I got £6,000, right, I'm going to go crazy this month, I'm going to say, I'm going to pay myself then a salary of 2,000 a month. Maybe I have another 100 a month expenses for software, for example. And therefore I know this is going to last me a little while, even though next month in January, I'm not expecting to get any money in, right? Total in zero. I'm not worried because I've still got this left over, right? I'm going to come to the end. I'm still going to have money in the bank. So the way that this kind of functions in terms of operating it is the question that it answers is, as you could say, when will I run out of money if I don't get any more jobs? And this is how I still do the financial management of my business, is just when will I run out of money if I don't get any more jobs? At the moment, for Bryant Research, the answer to that question is June 2026. But that I'm not worried about that. That's a good 6 months away. That's plenty of time to get more jobs. That's actually longer than it usually is, to be honest. I'm usually at about 3 or 4 months runway. And it is like that, right? And like I said, I've now got a staff of 5, so this is more like 10,000 a month, and it's constantly on my part. Where's the next work coming from? How can we get more work done and out the door so that we can charge a second invoice? Looking at something like this and doing the cash flow is not most of my job in terms of the time, but it's probably the most important part of the job. Just literally, there's a bank balance, there's a bank account which is the business, and that balance can go to zero, right? It's not there's nothing kind of magical going on. It just, we might run out of money if we don't finish our work on time. So cash flow forecast, that's a really, really important thing to get your head around. You'll notice, by the way, this is not complicated. I'm sure that some of your modules, you'll have done all the ratios, the accounting ratios, and all, you know, complicated econometric stuff and stuff like this. This is very, very basic. I think I learned this in business A level before I even did a business degree, but it's the fundamentals, right? I remember my mum having a book that says revenue is vanity, profits is sanity, but cash flow is king. That was a very catchy title that must have stuck with me. But that's so true. Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. Don't run out of business. Don't run out of money. Doesn't matter if I've got a £12,000 contract that's going to pay me all in March, because actually my rent's due next week and I need some money now, right? And equally, I might look at this and say, well, look at this. With the current plan here, we're actually going to dip below a zero bank balance at the end of February. We're going to have had not much more money in, we're going to have money going out, we're going to get to minus £300. You can look at that, and what you can do when you have a limited company is something called a director's loan, where you're basically lending the business money from your own personal money. So I would probably look at a scenario like this and say, well, look, we're going to dip below zero here, but I'm not worried because it's only 300 quid. I can do a director's loan to cover that, and I can also see that in 3 months' time will be £5,000 up again. So even when you do have periods where you dip under, have months where you get no money in, right, have months where you lose more money than you make, if you have your cash flow forecast in, like, sort of stored and ready, then you don't need to be thinking too much about that. Right, last thing, because I know we're going to leave some time for Q&A as well. The other side of this coin, the cash flow forecast, is the workflow forecast. And this is, I just kind of realized this quite recently as well, which is that, of course, if you're agreeing that you're going to do work in sort of 6 months' time and finish a contract in 6 months' time, you need to make sure that you actually have the capacity to do that. So this is, I guess, well, this is what it looks like when you have several people, but you can definitely do this with your own time as well. Very simply, these are the people on the team. Going forward, this is what each day will look like, right? I've got weeks in columns here, and then each person gets 5 rows for the days of the week. And I can look at this when I get a new email that says, oh, we're looking to do a project on such and such, can you help us? I will go to the workflow forecast and look at this and say, look, there's some nice gaps where it looks like Charlotte's got a little bit of time. I could give her an extra project. And it looks like Elise is going to have some time also after Christmas, so I could give her a project as well. This is not precise. Obviously, you don't know exactly how long things are going to take in practice, and you know these things always change somewhat. But it's good to know that roughly what is going on in terms of your capacity and you know what you might be able to do in terms of more work. And the main thing is to back yourself. Like I said at the start, and like you have observed throughout, I am in a lot of ways nothing special. Really, anybody could do the type of thing that I've done. If you announce yourself in the world as I'm going to start doing this now, and you do it, and people experience you doing it and see you doing it and see you doing it well, and have a sense that you're going to continue doing it, you can have people coming to you, hey, you do this, don't you? Yes, I do. When we're asked if we can do a project, which is something that we haven't really done before, I say yes, we can, and we will work out how to do it, and we always do. So backing yourself and taking those opportunities is a really important part of this, and yeah, just something that's important to know if you're looking to be self-employed. I used to say that I was freelance, and then I was self-employed, and now I say I run a business, but they all mean the same thing. You're just, as opposed to getting a regular salary, kind of out in the world, getting an occasional big chunk and having to make that work, make decisions about where you're going to spend your time and so on. It's been a pretty crazy 5 years that I've been doing this, honestly, but I have loved every moment of it. I felt very, very lucky to have had the chance to found a business and to run it and everything, and I feel very lucky to be able to share the experience with you all. So thank you again, Anaya, for inviting me. Oh, there you go, my slides are here, so you can see, well, that's my slides, I guess. You can also email me at chris@bryantresearch.co.uk, which I'll put in the chat, but we do have some time for questions as well, so let's do some questions. Hey,
brilliant, thank you for that, Chris. I think it's interesting because I think a lot of the struggles that you face in business are very similar to what I face in education and academia as well. So, you know, there's a lot that can be learned from this. I mean, I'll kick off the questions, and then I think Sarah has a bunch of questions for you about cultured meats and nature connection. Okay, so Bryant Research has only been sort of trading for 5 years, but in that time, you've done a huge amount. What are some of the things that you're most proud of doing in that time? What are some of the biggest impacts you've sort of seen with your work?
oh, that's a lovely question. Thank you. Nice, not a little softball to start.
Just start off with.
There's been so much good stuff. Honestly, I'm really proud of the kind of clients that we have had. Again, I know that probably most people here are not from sort of animal world, but when we look at all the different organizations that we've worked with, you know, there's a bunch of charities on here. We've worked with the Vegan Society and with Fauna-Lytics, with the Good Food Institute, you know, a bunch of charities that I'm, you know, really proud to have. ProVeg, Synergy, a bunch of charities I'm really proud to have on here, and also meat alternative companies with Better Meat Co, Ala Farms, Ivy Farms, a bunch of these organizations that we have been able to add value for. I think that's the main thing. Every one of these represents a project where, like I said, nobody, you know, it's a voluntary exchange. We must have been adding value for these orgs, and I'm really pleased that Bryant Research has become a recognizable name in animal circles, and that people kind of know what we do, and that a lot of the work that we've done, which is unfunded as well, and just we do our annual survey, which is based on questions that we'll put out, stats that we think are going to be useful for the movement, basically. But nobody's funding us to do that. And when we see those numbers being cited in big political campaigns, that's very exciting. For example, we had a number, I think it's 84% of people in the UK support restrictions on animal imports or animal product imports from countries with lower welfare standards, and that was very well cited by organisations who are doing a campaign on that particular issue in British politics. So seeing some of our stats up on the slides in Parliament, and you think, wow, that's good. That's we're reaching the right people with the kind of message that we're doing. But yeah, I've always just been really keen to add value for the movement and to help and to move things forward. And I think that people can sense that, and people, if you're doing good stuff, people will come to you.
Great, thanks for that. We have a bunch of questions from Sarah. Sarah, do you want to unmute and maybe ask these questions verbally? If you can.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Okay. So yeah, apologies. I am doing a bit of research into culture meets, hence they're all about that. And so my first question was, so yeah, regarding culture meets, where do you see the end goal being? Like, what do you see the end goal looking like? Do you believe that there's a world in which all the different little fine details for science can be optimized so that I don't know, like I've kind of been going down rabbit holes with like of all the processes of it, and yeah, like do you think that it can truly allow the environment to reach a kind of equilibrium where yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, good question. Well, I guess the question is like, can we solve cultivated meat? Basically, right? There are sort of technical challenges ahead for cultivated meat to be produced at scale and to be regulated and things like this. Is that roughly what you're asking? Like,
Yes, yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So, funnily enough, I have I have a debate semi-planned on this topic where I'm arguing in favour that cultured meat can be feasible at scale, and the other person's arguing against. So I don't want to give away too much of my talking points to that debate. That said, I mean, what I will say is this: there have been several times. So I've been working on this since about 2016. So wow, nearly 10 years I've been doing cultured meat stuff. And there have been, in that time, several predictions which have not come true, but kind of in both directions. So, there has certainly been some cultivated meat companies overclaiming, or just not being, like, for some companies it hasn't worked out. And there was just a big company in the US that has closed its doors this week. But at the same time, there has been a lot of naysayers who have been quite sure about particular technical barriers, which have since been blasted through. And, I've been around long enough to have seen some of those predictions being made and not coming true in either direction. So I guess I'm less, I guess in one sense, I'm less certain than ever about how exactly it will end up. But it seems to be that the ambitious projections not coming to pass seems to be more in the imagination of the people I interact with than the sort of doomer projections not coming to pass. So there have been people saying, you'll never get the cost of the cultured meat medium down below whatever level, and there are now already companies who can make it at a fraction of the level that was predicted. There's been lots of people have said it will never get to price parity with conventional meat, and that has already happened for some products again. So I think that it's really difficult to tell. And do you know what an interesting feature of this is? Because the cutting edge science is proprietary information in private companies, it's not necessarily public, and there is no one person who knows all of it. There are sort of secrets within companies that are locked out to the people outside of those companies. So even the experts don't know all of the cutting edge stuff. And I find personally, I'm just always being surprised by the barriers that are being smashed through. And the other thing as well is that I have more than once been blindsided by some cultured meat company that I've never heard of. They say coming out of stealth mode, where they have been doing stuff in the background and announcing some new landmark. So frankly, I would really hesitate to bet against it. And ultimately, I think that the answer is like all kind of, this is such a lecturer answer. It's like somewhere on the scale, right? To some extent, it's not that it won't be at all feasible. It already is feasible. There already has been. I heard at a conference recently over 100,000 people who have now eaten cultivated meat. That was from one company. One company has served over 100,000 people. That was news to me. I found that out like last month. So that's way more than I would have guessed. I would have guessed like maybe like I don't know, maybe 10,000, maybe 1,000. I don't know what I would have guessed, but way less than that anyway. So that was kind of good and reassuring news. And yeah, so long answer, I don't. Oh yes, and equally, when we get to the stage where you can create replicator steak perfectly and it's less expensive and all the rest of it, that might be some way down the road. But all of the shades of grey in between are, progress in the right direction, basically. That was a long answer to say I don't really know, wasn't it? I wouldn't bet against it.
I mean, like you said, it's impossible to know. Like, there's just so much information. But no, thank you.
Of course, yeah.
Great, thanks for that. And we have another question from Yasmin. I don't know if you can see the chat, Chris. Can you read that? So Yasmin's interested in hearing a bit more about your actual research. So could you talk about the kind of stuff you do on cultured meat acceptance, some of your more sort of like changing food system stuff? Like, yeah, give us an overview.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've realised it's basically nothing about my actual research skills, just talking about the business side. But we do social science research mainly. We do surveys, focus groups. We do some projects which are based on expert interviews. And we also do a good deal of economic and health and environmental modelling. So we do true cost accounting, which is like identifying the cost of the externality. So saying, this is the value of emissions caused by this industry or whatever it may be. There's different things that you can account for. But it's very much on the social science side of all of this. So to the extent that we're working with food tech companies, I'm actually not a biochemist or process engineer or anything like that. So we're on the social science side. We do, like I say, surveys, focus groups, and then also a lot of modelling stuff these days as well. Perhaps I can give some examples to make it a little bit more concrete. We've done things examining food security in the UK, for example. There are official DEFRA numbers about how self-sufficient the UK is with chicken and pork production, and they have very nice high numbers, official numbers in the 80s, I believe, % of the chicken in the UK is farmed in the UK, and same for pork. But what that number doesn't tell you, and what we added to that calculation, is that loads of their feed is imported soy from the rainforest of Brazil. So it sounds great, like, oh, this is UK chicken, this is UK pork, but you're not hearing about all of the massive amount of feed that has to get imported to support that UK farming. And once you account for that, our self-sufficiency in those products drops to about 40%. I think it's 40 and 50% respectively. So that's an example of the kind of modelling side that we do. And then, on the surveys, interestingly, all of the empirical research we do is like subtly different to, or maybe not that subtly different to academic research, which if you look at empirical papers, it's, inferential statistics and p-values and all that good stuff that you guys have been learning about. But really nobody outside of academia talks in those terms. So in an academic paper, if you're doing a survey paper, you might report, but it wouldn't be enough to publish on its own. X% of people agree that Y, right? You have to do some sort of regression to get an academic, which has its place. But really in communicating in the real world, like percentages of people who agree with stuff is most of what we're aiming for in terms of the survey. So it's actually much more straightforward than the kind of research that I was doing on my PhD, for example.
Well, I've posted some links in the chat to research that Chris and I have done, because I've worked with Bryant Research, and yeah, it's really, yeah, you've got a huge amount going on, which is really cool. We're running slightly over, but I want to finish up with one last question, which kind of builds on what Sarah and Yasmin are saying. So Yasmin had a second component to their question, where they said, based on your experience, do you feel humans generally feel like they have a natural right to use animals, whether for work, for food, or for any other purpose? And what role do you think the government plays or should play in shifting society away from animal consumption? So throughout the course, we've been exploring nature connection, we've been exploring relationships between humans and animals, humans and the natural environment, the kind of philosophy of all of that. What are your comments on that, and where do you think cultured meat kind of feeds in, and where does your research feed into that conversation? Do you think that cultured meat is the solution? Do you think it's, riff on that, Chris?
Yeah. No, good question. And yes, I do think that humans generally feel that way. Most humans seem to. There's a couple of parts to this. One is that the central thing in psychology of meat consumption is cognitive dissonance and the meat paradox and motivated reasoning, right? Whereby most people eat meat, and frankly, most people just haven't really spent any time thinking about animal ethics, for example. And when they are prompted to think about it, it's kind of coded as, well, I'm not a vegetarian, and so this isn't something that's for me. And furthermore, they think, presumably I have a good reason for not being a vegetarian, and so I suppose that I must think this. And they'll kind of work backwards to arrive at some supposed beliefs that they guess they must have if they're eating animals. But the reality is that most people just never been invited to think about it. So there's a weird cognitive process going on there whereby, it's motivated reasoning, right? People don't want to stop eating meat. They realize, if I say this is bad, I might have to stop eating meat, and I don't want to do that, so I'm going to have to come up with some reason to not say that. So there's a massive part of this is cognitive dissonance, and that's really like the central thing in meat psychology, if you think of it that way. And I think cultured meat, once people lose the motivation to do the motivated reasoning, they'll stop doing it, right? Why would I want to say, well, maybe animals are actually not conscious and don't feel any pain, and they're just doing sort of reflexive reactions? What would motivate me to go down that line of thinking if I didn't have to maybe stop eating bacon as a result of not going there, right? So I just think that it's a deeply practical thing. People recognize, I like eating meat, I don't want to stop eating meat, and therefore the cognitive dissonance process kind of follows from there for the most part. And then in terms of the role that the government can play, I think there's a really interesting question, because a lot of times people imagine that, well, if I was in charge, if I was the prime minister, I would just ban factory farms, right? And that would be it. Why don't they just do that? Well, it turns out that institutional stakeholders are actually beholden to individuals who have their preferences, and if the current Labour Prime Minister just says we're going to now ban factory farming, and as a result of that there's no cheap animal products, and everyone still wants their cheap animal products, well, then at the next election they're just going to vote for the other guy, right? Or the other girl, as it is. So although in a narrow sense they can do that, really they can't, because they and so too for the CEO of Sainsbury's can't just decide to stop selling factory farm products, because if Tesco keeps on selling them, everyone's just going to go to Tesco instead. So that said, there are things that institutions can do within the range of what their stakeholders might find acceptable. So for example, a meat tax is something that's like very politically unpopular, and probably like I don't want to say it's not politically feasible, but it'd be difficult politically. But there's a ton of other policies. For example, subsidies on alternative proteins, which is the other side of the same coin. which are much, much more well supported. And some policies which are extremely well supported, like improving animal welfare standards on farms, is one of those things which around 90% of people agree. Animal welfare labels, compulsory animal welfare labels, is another thing where a very high percentage of people agree, yes, that's something we should be doing. Okay, at least if you're buying the factory farm thing, you should know where it's coming from. That's something we don't have at the moment. That's something the government's considering at the moment, and there is very high public support for. And because there's very high public support, and because it's kind of on the agenda, it therefore becomes a bit of a political opportunity. And so, different animal organisations can get in and say, encourage this along and encourage this to happen. So something like that is more politically feasible because the public supports it to a greater extent. And meat tax, I believe, was bottom of that list in terms of well-supported policies. So it's the one that everyone thinks of, but it's the least well-liked. But there are certainly other things that you can do, and we have a report called Chewing It Over for the Social Market Foundation, where we have survey data on the support for about a dozen different government policies.
Great, thanks for that. I've put a couple of links in the chat as well. I think it might be best for us to leave it here, and then Chris, if you've got a few extra moments, we can stick around in case anyone has any additional questions. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
Great, cool. But it's been really great to hear from you, and you're doing so much good work, and it's nice to know it came from a business undergraduate, so you're all in a similar position. But yeah, say thank you to Chris, everyone.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you again.
Feel free.
Thank you.
Please get in touch with him if you want to connect. Let him know if you've got any feedback on this. You're on LinkedIn, right, Chris? Yeah.
Of course, yeah, Mr. LinkedIn. And I have literally a Google Drive folder of these 4 things I mentioned, so I will share templates if you reach out to me. I can share that with you.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, Chris. And then
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Great. Sarah, do you have any more questions? Is that why you put a thumbs up on that comment?
Yeah, if that's okay, just
Absolutely,
a quick one.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry.
Yeah,
Is it
so
okay if I just quickly interrupt?
Oh,
I
yeah.
was just so sorry, Sarah. The paper that you just mentioned in the end. Well, firstly, thank you for answering my questions. The chewing it over thing that you mentioned that you did for the Social Market Foundation.
That's right.
Is that publicly available?
Yes, it is. I'll bang the link in the chat for you.
I got it.
Oh,
I'm
that'd
Oh,
happy.
you beat me to it. Look at that. Beat me to the punch. And there's a graph in here which is,
Great.
tell you what, a ton of our charts look exactly like this, which is just a stacked bar chart with red and green. So it's one that looks like this, but it's
brilliant.
support or oppose different. Oh, here it is. Here it is. And there's the meat tax at the bottom. Yeah, there it is. Page 31 of that report.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Does anyone else besides Sarah have quick comments that you want to get through, or you're welcome to stick around for this discussion if you want. Sarah, I think we can go ahead then in that case.
Yeah, so I mean, bit of a kind of hand-wavy question, I guess, but where, and apologies, it's a bit of a random one, but where do you kind of see this relationship between business and this more anthropocentric kind of view kind of aligning with ideas such as deep ecology and things? Do you think there's ever going to be a world in which they can kind of align somehow? I mean, it sounds a little bit impossible. One's anthropocentric, others biocentric and things, but do you think that things such as cultured meats could be used to kind of aid in that kind of journey towards deep ecology?
Yeah, really nice question. Really nice question. Because I mean, yeah, we think about these things as being fundamentally in tension. Surely, if there's businesses with sort of polluting factories and stuff like that, that it must be, bad for ecology. And many businesses, no doubt, are. Most businesses are amoral in the sense that they are just not really considering morality in their decisions. They're not trying to be evil, but they are trying to maximize for profit. And if they break some eggs along the way, then they don't mind that too much, basically. But it really depends on what the business does, right? Because if you're a cultivated meat company and the better your business does, the more factory farmed meat that you're replacing, well, then it pretty much is one-to-one, in my view, with your business doing well and doing good in the world. It's not necessarily the case, and I mean, it's honestly a really interesting experience running a private company for the public good. If you could, well, I never coined that before, but that's good. Running a private company for the public good, because it's kind of always a degree of judgment calls, where there's no charity commission or other kind of authority saying, okay, you have to do it this way. And you can sign up to such frameworks. There's B Corp, for example, which is sign up to, you're going to follow some certain rules, and then you can call yourself a B Corp, I guess. There's, like I say, we have about 15,000 a month, I think, at the moment, payroll expenses, and so that's comes out of the bank account every month, and I have to make sure that that's covered, and that's sort of the main thing to keep the lights on, basically. And beyond that, we are just looking to do as much as we can in the direction that we're going. So having, we have here, we pay staff quite modestly. We give to sponsor conferences, which is in some senses like a marketing expense, and we hope that that's going to yield, it's an investment, because maybe someone will give us some business from that in the future. And they have done, right? I think we've sponsored 3 or 4 conferences at this point, and at the time I'm always like, am I really going to pay £1,000 or £1,500 to put my logo on this website? Like, is this right? But it's paid off. It's kind of to my surprise, it's been it has yielded more than we've spent on it, which wasn't really my intention when doing it. But yeah, I think that if you are in a position to be able to have a private business, and particularly, by the way, if you're in a position as I was at the start when I graduated during COVID, and I had a couple of jobs that I'd carried on from doing my PhD, and I was spending no money all of a sudden, I could kind of build up a bit of savings, really, and didn't pay myself at all for the first few months. And then from there, you do have a little bit of freedom, and you can say, okay, maybe I will do this one job that I think is going to be particularly impactful for no money. I'll do it pro bono. Or maybe, we are going to sponsor this or give to that charity, whatever it may be. You kind of need resources to be able to do all that good stuff. So yeah, I don't know if that quite answers your question. Do I think business not necessarily in conflict with deep ecology? I think in most cases it is in conflict, but not necessarily, and it definitely depends like what the business is doing. Like I say, some is going to be very much aligned.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Cool. Does anyone else have any final questions for Chris? I mean, I have loads, but I guess a final one for me. I'm interested in this statement of, so everyone receives a living wage, but the directors, so you, are the lowest. So how do you make that calculation, and how did you kind of come to that approach, given that the way that you do business is very different, is sort of very purpose driven? How do you manage all of the issues around sourcing talent and living costs? And yeah, can you reflect on that?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, actually, that is a little bit out of date for the living wage. I think they used to be paid a bit more modestly than they are now. We did do some good raises this year because there has been so much inflation, and I was like, this is ridiculous, right? We all need a wage. I am still the lowest paid person, and I like the idea that I am not that I like have a sense of how much they are all getting and having to live on, and that I'm not like blind to that, I guess. Now I will say that's not my only income, so it's a little bit not quite in that sense, but yeah, I think for me that has been important to be kind of the floor, to know that everyone else is being looked after. But I mean, again, there is trade-offs when you're trying to be mission driven, because you think, well, the value for money for effective animal advocacy or effective animal altruism charities is so great. I think it's about 4 animals to the dollar, that if I ostensibly altruistically want to pay my staff a little bit more, well, then you're saying, well, actually, is that altruistic, right? Really, it's a trade-off, and maybe I'm basically giving money which can have much less marginal utility to pay my staff a little bit more than if I were to save 4 chickens from a factory farm for the same dollar.
It's very utilitarian of you, Chris.
It is, well, yeah, and that is kind of how I think, like, weirdly. But then, as you said, there's like second order effects, and of course, if you are paying everyone as little as you can get away with, of course you have a minimum wage, right? But as little as you can get away with, then it does limit your ability to get, people who are further along in their career, people who have a bit more experience, and so on. So, I mean, I have one person who is sort of a bit more senior than the others, is the only other person who's, I guess, is the same age as me, or maybe 1 year younger, but everybody else is sort of a few years younger, and both of our junior. And so this one guy is paid a little bit higher than the rest of the team, and honestly, on balance, I think my experience in doing that, having, spending a little bit more money and having a little bit more senior person, would recommend for the most part. And I think that's also something, when you come to hiring, you have to get out of your own way, or like not have an ego about it, in the sense of hiring someone who is going to be better and more competent than you are at doing this job. It's it's so worth, like, once you do that, you'll think, why would I not do this all the time, and why, right, well, I should have all senior people. No, of course it can't work quite like that, but it's been a great experience having the one other sort of senior data scientist on the team, who's our director of research, and I think that has definitely changed my thinking about what level of pay we should be offering, because, as I said before, I just thought value for money equals pay as little as possible, and we did all have very modest salaries at one point, and we do still have quite modest salaries, but yeah, I do think that if it can afford you to get better people and who are very effective team members, then it can be a good investment.
Yeah, totally. And it's a hugely competitive space. And I think any of you that are looking to go into careers in sustainability or animal welfare or whatever, there's a huge amount of talent and a huge amount of competition, because it's a job that people really appreciate and really love. So yeah, but it's worth pursuing, I think. We've gone way over time, but thank you so much for staying on for a bit longer, Chris. I'm sure Yasmin and Sarah, if you want to get in touch and ask any further questions, please do email. Brilliant. All right. Well, thanks so much, Chris.
Thank
Chat
you.
to you soon,
Thanks
everyone.
so much.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
Have a good
guys.
holidays.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bloop. Well,
Cool.
thank you.